So I want to thank everybody for having me, particularly the school and Dean Blood and my first name. Peter was a brilliant talk, actually. It's so nice to have someone actually explain to me what happened. I was there. I missed the whole thing. We're here. There's two parts to this talk. There's 15 minutes now, and then there's the 2-hour talk I'm going to give this afternoon in 30 minutes, which I think I have to speak very fast. So. I believe we're here for two reasons. One is the person Jacques Derrida, and the other one is the writings of Jacques Derrida. And I try to use, I be careful not to say the text of Jacques Derrida. I mean the writings. And I want to tell you that they're fundamentally incompatible. And even though I'm in love with both, I think it's extraordinary if anyone on earth has ever written a text or writings which actually makes it very clear that whoever wrote it is probably the least person who would ever want to ask what it says. It's Jacques Derrida. So when I hear Peter quoting Jacques Derrida, I think he's making a brilliant comment on a man and a fundamental error on the work. And so this afternoon I'm going to try to show you now that I've understood not only understood what happened back then, I now understand what I'm going to show you this afternoon. I'm going to show you how architecture has been more political than Peter just suggested throughout its entire history. It is perhaps the most political, but perhaps in counterintuitive ways. Now, this morning I want to talk just a second about the person. I met Jacques Derrida in the course of the work with Renato and Thomas Laser. He entered my life. I hope my experiences mirror yours, or mirror yours, sorry. There have been people that came into my life and just hit me like a brick. The first was the films of Woody Allen. I just couldn't believe. It was actually like I was seeing my life on the screen, except for a skinny little guy instead of a big fat guy. But it was incredible. It just felt like life. Then came the music of Jimi Hendrix. And all my life up to that point, I played with great affection, and even to this day, classical music. But when I heard the music of Jimi Hendrix, it wasn't like new. It was like, oh my God, I've been hearing that my whole life, and finally somebody's playing it. And that is exactly how I felt when I read the writings of Jacques Derrida. It's not like, what incredible new ideas. It's like, this is exactly how the world feels to me. But finally, someone has said it. And that was deeply moving. So I did everything I could. Today I would be arrested for stalking. I mean, as soon as I got to New York, I went up to Yale to hear all of his lectures. And got there, sat down, he started to lecture, and then I realized he was lecturing in French, and I didn't speak French. And so I started to look at the students' notes, and they were writing stuff like, can you meet me later on at 5 o'clock in the afternoon? I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, this is Jacques Derrida lecturing to these guys, they're French students, and they're writing notes to each other like, can we have a date? And I was thinking, it was existentially dislocated. So I got to know him pretty well, and I can tell you a few things. I want to repeat a little bit what Peter said. Jacques Derrida did not think Peter understood one thing about deconstruction. He did not. He loved Peter. I think he really did love him. He admired Peter's work. For him, Bernard was a much closer model. Jacques Derrida liked me. I think he really liked me. I think he also had the same opinion of my understanding of his work. He endured it. He actually deeply admired Mark's book. He thought it was the very best thing written in architecture, and I think that's true. But two things happened. And then I spent a week with him in Paris when we were working on the book for the Choral Works. I don't know, Marguerite, this will maybe make you laugh or make you cry, I don't know. But he'd had a hernia operation. So I'm talking to you about the man. We're in the hospital. And every time the orderly would come in to take his blood pressure, he would say, I think that guy's going to kill me. Do you remember this? He just was obsessed with the idea that this guy with long hair was going to kill him. And I thought, wow, this doesn't quite fit with the text. It seems quite Freudian. And then later on, the most important thing of all happened, and that is when Peter Eisman presented the project, and I'll show you the project right now. Just very briefly. This is the letter. It just disappeared. How is that possible? Did you see the letter? Did you see it briefly? And then, oh, there it is. That was, maybe I shouldn't do this. Maybe it's a bad idea. So this is the letter that Jacques Derrida wrote to Peter Eisman about what the choral works should be like. And basically, he draws a sort of grid and tries to make it look a little bit like a lyre and a little bit like a piano. And he's explaining to, because Peter insisted that he participate as a designer. And so he sends this letter from Yale University. And this becomes the basis of the project. And this is the project. And when Jacques Derrida saw this project, he said, and it's in the text, no, this is wrong. It's too complicated. It should be much simpler, much, much simpler. Chora is nothing, but even nothinger than nothing. It's the nothing into which nothing gets inscribed. And so it was at that moment that Peter and I looked at each other, because we had just read a 21,000-word complicated essay by Jacques Derrida on chora. One of the most sophisticated, complicated, detailed, astonishing accomplishments of intellection in the world. He thought that was okay. He could do that in writing, but it was not okay for us to do this in architecture. Architecture had to look like the thing it meant. And we began to realize that for all of Jacques Derrida's wonderful writing, he had no concept of architecture. None of it. And so that's where so then I just want to show you one more thing. And this is a little bit better. Now, let me just talk to you about what it was like for me. Is there I don't know if you can see, this is from a book called Spurs or Epirods. It's the only book in which the French is next to the English and the English translation can be compared with the French. What's incredible about this is how horrible the English translation is. How it's not just horrible in the sense of being inept, it's actually, I don't know, malicious. So because the French, the whole book is about the question of style. It's one of and Nietzsche's use of style. And every tactic in the translation is to undo the style of Jacques Derrida. Because one thing one must understand is whether you trust his philosophy, believe his thinking, and I don't think he would even call it philosophy. He was one of the world's great 20th century writers, ranking, I think, with the great literary writers of his period. And if you look in the French, it says the question of style, it is always the examination, the weighing of a pointed object, sometimes only a pen, but also perhaps a stylet or a stylus, or even, he uses the word poignard. If you read the first three sentences, the entire style is taken apart, ruined. But instead of ending with the word poignard, which is a dagger used to assassinate people, it ends with the word rapier, which not only echoes the word rape, but also is merely a decorative object, a sword worn strictly for decoration. So the entire text is a feminist undoing of the idea of Jacques' writing of style in a brilliant way. I don't know Barbara Harlow. I don't know if it was unconscious, conscious, or malicious, but everything, and just in this one paragraph, for example, she will say oftentimes she uses something like these aura stylus, but he only uses one time, matière ou de matrice, which is to say matter or matrix. He knew how to use a coordinate conjunction, but she undoes his entire work. Now let me just show you something fantastic. If you look on the back, it says Harlow's translation is easily the most readable Derridian text available in English. And it says, this dual language edition offers the English speaker reader who has some knowledge of French an opportunity to examine the stylistic virtuosities of Derrida's writing, of particular significance for his analysis of the question of style, which is an incredibly interesting thing to read on the back of the thing, which just has undone the whole problem. So at that point, I swear to God, I don't understand it. So I'm going to ask you to do something. I'm going to put a text up by Woody Allen, which perfectly describes what my entire experience of reading Jacques Derrida was. Okay? I know how unpleasant it is to have to read a text. It's a funny text. I don't know if you'll find it funny. But this is exactly the description that after all of my work of studying French, I went to Alan Bass, who translated Jacques Derrida's writing, to be my analyst. I just absorbed myself in his work. But this is the net effect. So I'm the mind. So I look forward to talking to you this afternoon.